As part of this webinar, one of the other things that I really wanted to talk through was a little bit about our new product, the Tablion Data Portal. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give a quick 5-minute overview of what Tablion does and how it's really designed to assist government organizations and academic organizations and people in the private sector who are all looking at ways to make their data more accessible to other organizations or other people or researchers in a nice, secure way. So what you can see in front of you is a white labeled instance of Tablion that we've deployed that's really just designed to show off all of the features here. As you can see, the homepage is a bit of a blank slate, and it really provides users with the capability to just record everything they need on that home screen to give people access to the data that's there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show what those data sets look like and show you how people interact with them as well. As you can see in Tablion, it provides the ability for us to show a full listing of data sets that are available for researchers to access. It gives us the name, it gives us the type of data, it gives us a little bit of information around what that data means and how to access it, and then also the passport that's necessary. And that data passport is something we'll have a look at in a second. With these data sets, what we're really looking at is the ability for users to understand at that metadata level everything around what that data means. So as you can see, we're looking at an employment services data set that is capturing information about people, interacting with an employment service to, resolve an unemployment problem. This is a really big fictional example, but it showcases exactly what we're talking about here of showing that we can talk about very sensitive information. So the date of birth of an individual without actually sharing it. So I can tell you what data is available in this data set, and users can start selecting it, interacting with that data, and start to build up a basket of information of data they'd like to receive. What I can do from that then is I can then start looking at the ability to build a data access request. So I can request those variables and start building out a data request. So longitudinal study of employment outcomes. And I'll also say I'm doing a study on resolving unemployment. The idea here is that we can tell the data custodians or the end approvers of the data what I'm using this data for. I can also specify whether or not it's just for me or as a team activity, and I'll just do an individual one to make it a little bit quicker. The other thing I can do is I can then start to answer more in-depth questions around what I'm trying to do with this data. So I can document why I'm collecting it. And then the administrators of this system can also start to define their own questions and their own questionnaires with a lot of dynamicness that allow them to, capture additional information around why people are using it, whether or not they're a safe and trusted user, whether or not they're using that data in the correct ways to achieve the correct outcomes. So I can build an entirely long data set questionnaire with this ability to capture information about the use of data as part of that data access request. And that's all customizable, and I'll show that in a second. And then what I can do is, lastly, I can just make declarations around that as well. So what you can see here is, again, on the last step, I can go through and refine the information necessary for this request. So I can go through and I can add additional questions in and then build my request out of that process. Once I've saved the request, it'll take me through to an interactive portal where I can communicate with the data custodian, and they'll tell me, whether or not that data can be approved. So behind the scenes, what we're doing here is we've built a data request and we're waiting on submission. It can go off to the right areas then, and they can do the approvals process as part of that daily business of requesting data. One of the really good things about Tablion is it will tell me if I'm actually eligible to get that data to lower the barrier of kind of effort required from a data approver's perspective. And as you can see here, I haven't actually submitted all of the necessary questions to request that data. So I haven't got a passport, I haven't gone through an accreditation process, so I can't actually submit this to anyone yet. And that's really designed to put a stopper in there to save effort from the data custodian's perspective, to reduce the amount of time recording and capturing these data requests. What I can do is I can start to build out those passports. So as you can see here, it's told me that I need a type 1 secure data passport, which we've designed for these demo purposes, and I can start that application process. What we can see here is a user starts to see these lists of questions that allow them to understand what's necessary for them to provide to the data custodians to get access to this data in a more generic sense. What I can do is I can start the application and I can start answering all of these additional questions. And again, these are defined by the custodians and by the administrators of the systems themselves that are necessary for us to understand what data needs to be collected. I can then make declarations around the accuracy of this information necessary for us to do those kind of box ticking exercises that are required to do this audit trail to understand who's using the data. And then I could submit that off to the appropriate custodians. And as you can see, after I've submitted the application, we've got a whole bunch of information around when it was submitted, where it went off to, and who I'm waiting on for the approvals process. So behind the scenes, emails have been generated through the system that are going off to the appropriate areas to get them to approve any necessary steps required for me to build out that data passport. If I go back to my data request, you'll now see that I've submitted the application, but it's still in that pending state because we're waiting on approval. So the idea is, again, we're trying to streamline this process as much as possible while putting the right checks and balances in place. One of the really great things about Tablion is it's designed to be done in a way that is completely configurable by each department and each agency. So what they're able to do is they're able to define all of the different passport types, data sets themselves, and information around what documents are necessary to be provided to users who are trying to access data through their specific Tablion portal. If I go in, what I can see is I can manage every part of this passport application process, from the name and the definition, declarations and instructions, all the way through to all of the necessary questions as well. These can be chunked out into sections and completed by users as they go through the process. We're also able to save templates that are necessary for data sets that are associated with these data passport types as well. The idea is that we've built this in a way that we can really make sure that it's configurable to each organization's needs, so that as they're trying to build out these portals, they can define what their processes are in a standardized way that connects to existing metadata registries like the Aristotle metadata registry. We can also attach the ability to specify certain documents that need to be uploaded. And one of the great features of Tablion is the ability for these documents to be stored in a secure way that allows us to track the authorization of those as well. So if a user is required to upload police checks or working with children's checks, we can do that through the system, and they'll be able to capture that in the system so that there's a full audit trail with all of the data requests. I think that's pretty much everything that I wanted to demo as part of today's webinar. What I really wanted to do is come back to this data set and really talk about how Aristotle's really playing an important part in making sure that those data sets are defined in a nice, standardized way that meets a lot of our organizational requirements and the legislative requirements that are coming out of places like the ONDC. What it does is it makes sure that we've got all of that metadata, but it's now being done in a way that we can unlock the power of that metadata and build these data baskets and these data portals so that users can start to harness that to interact with data requesters in an efficient and secure way. So thanks very much for watching that part. We'll move on to the rest of the webinar in a second.